Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars Skeleton Crew video. We're looking forward to episode 5 tomorrow. Can you believe how quickly that came around? Now, I think I've discussed episode 4 to death, but I do have a couple more thoughts, a couple more theories, and one or two oddities I noticed about the most recent episode on At Attin. And don't worry my dear friends, there is no repeated material, there is nothing we're going to cover again. I'm keeping it fresh. Go and check out my other videos for some of my earlier thoughts. But today, we're going to focus mainly on the destruction of At Attin, the mystery of what caused the wreckage on the Jaws of the Old Republic. There's an interesting connection to the Alien franchise, as well as, I'm afraid, Palpatine. I know, Star Wars keeps going back to him, but there is some evidence. But first things first, what we know for certain is the children and Jod need the coordinates to At Attin, which SM-33's former captain destroyed. So they're in a bit of a pickle, and as I said the other day, their best bet is to go to one of these other At-worlds, At Horrifying, At I-2. If At Attin is still intact, well, just about, then I'm sure some other Jewels of the Old Republic are still there too, each with their own tower. But then it dawned on me, the mystery of the show is multifaceted, because if SM-33 and his former captain had nothing to do with the destruction of At Attin, then what force wreaked havoc there? What tore this world apart? As well as presumably all of those, except for At Attin. The latter was protected by its barrier. What led to the rumour that the Jewels of the Old Republic were destroyed, as Kim said? It's an important question because something or someone had a vested interest in demolishing those once serene planets. The reason I separate this from SM-33 is that his captain's mission was to find the treasure on At Attin. The destruction of the other worlds is a separate mystery. So here's the question, who would want to cause havoc on these worlds? One theory is it was the Nihil, but then we have 3 clues that hints at something bigger. Did you know the name At Attin is named after Acheron from the Alien franchise, the name of the colony LV-426? One of the orbiting moons of the gas giant Kalpamos was a very dangerous location, and the mental imagery in connection to xenomorphs taking over is one that makes me think the disaster on At Attin is more sinister than we assumed. I started brainstorming about Star Wars equivalent warlike species such as the Grisk or the Yuuzhan Vong, who are outside of the Force as the Jedi knew it, making them perfect candidates to cause widespread destruction. And then of course we see a headless statue. We don't know who this guy was, but I have a feeling that's going to be very important further down the line. And then I've seen a few comments about the climate controlling satellites, the ones outside of At Attin. Is this satellite part of Operation Cinder, following the death of Emperor Palpatine? Operation Cinder was the first part of Palpatine's contingency, the codename for an orbital bombardment which sought to punish the Empire for failing to prevent his death. We saw these kind of satellites in the Shattered Empire comics, Battlefront 2, it was mentioned in The Mandalorian Chapter 15. It's an important part of the post-Episode 6 world. My guess is it's just a climate satellite. That being said, Operation Cinder did involve the use of orbital satellites and other types of weather control technology. Some planets were destroyed, others, just like At Attin, left in ruins, and it's possible this is one of the types of satellite. And to add to this, even if these have nothing to do with Cinder, the Empire was looking into climate disruption methods long before Palpatine died. This could be a remnant of that. But if this is intended as an Easter egg and an allusion to Operation Cinder, then our theories about the remnant and the Imperial holdouts could be true. They could have been what caused this disaster. The weaponry in Episode 4, some of the Imperial helmets, the Mud Trooper helmets, do point to some kind of Imperial presence in the recent past. But it does beg a question I've been wondering. How much did Palpatine know about the At colonies? In one way or another, Sidious had a finger in every pie, especially if it related to the Jedi or the Sith. Think about his obsession with the world between worlds. In the case of At Attin, he probably never found it, due to the barrier. But then the question becomes, if the Empire found At Attin, why didn't they take the coordinates to At Attin? Remember that because SM-33 remembers the warring factions, his former captain stealing the coordinates was more recent, so maybe they were still there when the Empire showed up, unless they simply didn't bother to look. They just bombarded At Attin. The treasure of At Attin seems more of interest to pirates than it did the Sith. Operation Cinder targeted various planets and moons across the galaxy, whether they were Imperial or not. In open revolution, it was supposed to cause chaos. Something very interesting is how Operation Cinder was undermined by Grand Admiral Rey Sloane. She's the one who will eventually be responsible for the creation of the cloned Emperor, and first, Snoke. So as you can see, there are many different ways they can tie this into known Star Wars content further down the line. The Operation Cinder theory does hold some weight. It's certainly on Jon Favreau's radar, when Migs Mayfeld killed his commanding officer for celebrating the loss of so many lives in the pursuit of the return of the Empire. The Empire continued carrying out for many months several devastations. The state of At Attin, a planet left in tatters but not fully destroyed, is absolutely evocative of a post-Cinder world. So just a few thoughts I had. What do you guys think? I don't know which route and which angle they're going to go for, but another major question the show has led us to ask is what happened to Wim's mother. In episode 1, we learned that she used to read to Wim, but what happened to her? Once upon a time, did she escape the barrier? Is she still alive? So, At Attin was protected. It's one described by Kim as a planet of wonder, and as weeks go by, Star Wars fans are wondering if the treasure there is something more than the obvious, the old credits. The mystery deepens, and to be honest with you at this point, I'm just excited and along for the ride. But this episode stands out in a very unique way, because Star Wars is full of conflict. Rebels versus Empire, the Resistance versus the First Order, Jedi versus Sith. Each generation inherits the last one's wars and conflicts. And what's going on between the two bandit factions is the product of puppeteering and the doing of a third party. In terms of its symbolism and the metaphor, it's kind of similar to the Clone Wars, the Separatists versus the Republic. But it was Palpatine, the Sith, behind everything. I'm not saying it's the same here, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to be Imperial by nature, but if it is, as George Lucas famously said,
it's like poetry, sort of they rhyme.
But we need to dig beneath the surface. If you read between the lines of what Kim was saying, the jewels of the Republic that were devastated were all impacted by the same thing. Operation Cinder is a good contender, because if the Troik and the Hatton use Imperial-era helmets, it couldn't have been that long ago since the bombardment of the planet. I could be wrong, just a theory, but in the same breath, it is possible they've been in conflict for generations. It's a war-torn world, and the people simply do not know a different way to live. Unless Hayna's dad isn't revealing the full truth. Maybe he never told his daughter what the world used to be like. So many mysteries. What do you think's going on At Attin, At Attin? Are we going to see some more At-Worlds? And are you excited for episode 5? If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.